Okay, my outstanding friends, as you know, I claim that there is nothing but biology, which means that I have to account for every one of these pictures of these unexplained geological features in a biological perspective, which is mud fossil. And they are all, even Devil's Tower, all the stuff down in South America, Bolivia, all of these blocks, these H blocks and all the Puma Punku down there. I have to explain all this stuff, and I have to make it make sense in every which way, otherwise my theory does not hold water. So let's see if my water will hold. We're going to find out. All right, this is down in South America. This is Puma Punku, I think they call it, Tiwanaku, something like that, down in South America. I think it's Bolivia. Now, I've looked at these pretty carefully, and there's virtually no doubt in my mind these are geopolymer things, crunched up something, which is going to be body parts, and then made into these forms. So they must have had some forms here somewhere to do this, to create these shapes. That's my, you can see these little cuts and all these little indentation, very, very intricate work. And why did they do this in the first place? I don't have any explanation. All I know is these are just gigantic blocks, and there's a ton of them, and not just one here and there. There's a lot of them. Okay, it's no surprise that I have a different take virtually on everything to do with geology and history and everything, because it's nothing but biology. So I say virtually everything is made from the remains of biological creatures. Even the things we eat are from dead things. I mean, it's just nothing but death creating everything there is. Okay, my friends, as you know, I have shown many, many, many times that the Earth and everything, even the things that are in space, are biological. So I have to account for everything that I'm showing you here. Every single thing that is on Earth, I have to be able to explain. Now, I'm going to start with things that are made from things that are on Earth, but are from antiquity. This is down in Puma Punku. And it is, these are geopolymers, the geological things on Earth, which are body parts. They're all body parts. And then this was actually crunched up, all ground up, and I believe flushed of all its metals. And what was left was an aggregate of tendon and, some calcium and this and that, but not the metals. They wanted to, I believe, extract the metals. And I'm going to show you a couple close-ups here, and then I'm going to show you why I can make that statement and pretty much make it stick. All right, let's take a look at this a little bit close-up and what my claims are about this particular material. All right, I'm not even going to guess at what they did with these. I have no idea why. They seem to have no purpose whatsoever that I can determine. And however, let's just go with what is the material. I say it's ground up body parts. And it's the body parts that they couldn't use to make the walls and all that stuff. The walls that have the bumps in them and everything. I'll show you that in a minute. That's made from tendon. This is scraps, all ground up, and then I believe they flushed it to get the metals out of it. And they ended up with this aggregate, which is what they added to it. Maybe they threw in a little lime or some kind of volcanic ash or something to stabilize it. But I'm not sure what the actual chemical composition is here. But when I see these, these little white spots. Normally that's lichen. And that grows where there was vein blood, the black, hard vein blood. That's where lichen grows. And then, of course, you see a little green here and there, which is some red blood that was probably still left inside there that's sort of leaking out. Red blood leaks. The black blood is a gritty, hard, it's called magnetite, and it's hard when it sets up. The red stays pretty liquid, and that's why most of the red would have washed out of this completely. Otherwise, you'd see this be like red bricky. But they, in my mind, they flushed this and flushed it and flushed it until they got all the stuff out. And again, I'm going to show you why I make that statement, because I have my counters are made out of the same sort of stuff as this. This is more refined than mine. I'll show you. I believe this is what they were doing back there. Could be for everywhere around the world. Bodies have all of the chemistry of the world is inside your body, every bit of it. All of the transition metals, all the minerals, the blood, all kinds of little structural components in there that make for a good solid concrete. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. And this guy here, I call this the Wheel of Death, and I think that's what that says on here. And they're grinding people up with a little serrated grinder. That, you see those? That just didn't squish them. That's cutting them into little tiny blocks. And then they would flush those blocks, and then those blocks would be still structural. And I'll show you how they were structural. And again, my counters, I believe, are made of something like that. I'm not kidding you. All right, so we know that we got that grinder thing going on. Now, this is a lung, and this has what's called pleura, which is this fabric, and it's a really strappy little straps all over the place with balls and so forth, saturated with blood. I mean, literally saturated, the whole thing, and it's got a ton of pleura, which is this stuff here. All inside, even in these rubber bags, which are the little alveoli, they're connective tissue. They have to do this all day long, 24 hours a day for your entire life. They're a big rubber bag that fills up with air and it dumps. It fills up and dumps. It's just as simple as that. So this is this rubbery stuff. Now, you see the white fibers here? You see that? If you ground that up, and then you soak this in probably acid, salts, whatever, some kind of solution, everything basically would go away except these strappy little things and some little red little bits here and there and some black little bits here and there. But you'd have little blocks, because that's what tendons are. You see that? You see those little strappy looking things? Look. You see how blocky they are? Now, if you ground that up from a bigger creature, this is the size of us. This lung is the size of a human lung. Here's another one here, but that turned to quartz. It's saturated with blood. The blood just running out of it. I mean, I'm serious. The blood will last forever in these things. So if we ground that up, what would it look like? Well, let's take a look. All right, let's look at this a little carefully here. This is not a real good homogeneous slurry, to my mind. They must have mixed this in vats and just dumped it into whatever these molds were coming down into them, and then pressed into them with something or whatever. I'm not sure how they would have made these, I got to be honest with you. However, you see this? This is like a slippy slurry, and then this is all gritty looking here. And the same thing over here. How it's got real smooth spots, and then it's got all the gritty stuff. These are smooth inside here. There's a few things you got to look at and take away from. But there's a lot of lichen, which is the black blood. Now, don't forget, this, in my mind, this was all ground up really fine. Very, very finely ground. then flushed completely of the bloody stuff, because the blood carries all the metals. The blood is where the metals are in your body. There's just nothing but metals, basically, in the blood. Okay, look at this. I want you to look very carefully at what you see. This, to my mind, is ground up flesh. These are little vein pieces. They don't come in just little balls here and there. These are ground up veins that are still in here. They're kind of hard. The red stuff is blood, which is still a little here and there, not much. It's where it collects around the veins because they sort of run together primarily. Now look at this. This is all ground up. You see these blocks? And it's got quartz in the middle of everything that shouldn't be there. These little blocks are from grinding it up and then putting it in a vat and slurrying it and slushing it and getting all of the red blood out of there. Almost all the red blood is gone. Otherwise, this would look like a red brick. It would look like this. You have all saturated with red in there because it's red is what your blood is made of, red stuff. Very little red left in here. This was saturated and evacuated. Now, I'm going to tell you, this is the truth now. This one spot, that's basically the only place in the counter I can find, and I think this is a piece of metal. I'm pretty sure that's metal. But you see these blocks? There's no reason for these blocks to be blocked like this. That little piece seems to be special. All right, because that little piece of metal is there. Now listen to this. This counter is almost all basically like this, and a little brown here and there. It's just basically what you see in here. But none of that. It's gone. It's not there. There is none of that. Where I got another shot over here. It is really, really up close. You see it? That's tendon. That is tendon. It's not broken off. It would never, ever be like that, ever. There's no reason whatsoever for this to be, and it's the only possibility is it's ground up. And this is not just one little tiny thing with a little block of stone. This goes 14 feet that way, 14 feet this way, and an island, and it's all the same, and that's basically the only piece of metal I could find. And I looked, I didn't go crazy looking, but I didn't find any more. And all of it would look just about like this, and I'm almost certain that's what they had to have done to get this. And now it's just they dumped it somewhere, and now they're cutting it up in slabs and putting it in people's kitchens. I mean, that's, I can't see any other possibility. There's no other possibility. Tendons look like this. Tendons look like that. They're straps of tendon. And they're all the same. Doesn't matter what you got. They're all basically the same. Here's what they look like when you get right down into the tiny little pieces of them. That's what tendons look like. They ground them all up, and there's little chunks. You see? We think they're all one big long strap, and there's no divisions in them, but that's not true. Everything in your body has layer, which nobody even thinks about. Thousands of layers that just are unnoticed, basically, because everything has to slide among itself and bend and twist and do all that. You can't do that with solid things. It can't happen. Then in addition to that, there's all kinds of different molecular structure to these things, which make them more strength, tighter. They just can't do this. Some of them really hard to twist, and some of them kind of floppy. I think there's 28 different collagens, and then there's keratins, which are the real tough ones, like your fingernails and stuff. These are more into your tendons, and again, I have to count for every single one of these things, and I can. I'm very, very sure I can. And here's a close-up of that lung again. That's all ground up. That's the lung itself. And that's where it's just saturated with blood. And this was DNA tested, CAT scanned, 100%, and was dense with the DNA. Because I drilled into there until it's red blood. It came out just basically like red blood. And I was very careful. I didn't damage anything now. And this is what tendons look like here. This is the tendon straps. They're all over the world. If you know what to look for. And some of them have very strange patterns in them. See this? That's a tendon. You see that? That was that tendon I was just showing you. But what's this? What do you see there? You ever see monster truck tires? Driving over soft tendon. It drove over it, but it's soft. And they knew how to make the tires just like we make them now for these Rovers. And this right here is the edge of the tendon. These are the little tendon fibrils. You see that? That's how fine these fibers are. And same as these. And these are the same things. These are the tendons. They cut these slabs and made walls out of them. These are the tendons. I'm sorry, case is closed on this now as far as I'm concerned. No, it has zero question. You see these ones with the bumps on them? Those come off of a ponerosis tendon. This is Achilles tendon. Different story. This makes fabulous, great tendon slabs when they cut it. The other ones, they just put them up there, and they were just put them up as putty, and they molded into the walls just like you can't put a piece of paper between them, like these right here. These are just cut little slabs of a ponerosis tendon. That's why they have the bumps sticking out of them. Okay, again, nothing but biology wherever you look. These bumps are from a ponerosis tendon. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're big. They can be absolutely enormous, like at Arches National Park. Okay, this is where they cut a bunch of slabs from this Achilles tendon, and they made walls down there. So these came off of the Achilles tendon, very, very high quality stuff. Now, the ponerosis tendon was as well, but they had to deal with the bumps. A little bit different. All right, just so we don't miss anything, there are no bumps. They're just those nice straps, and they were cutting chunks out of them. That's Achilles tendon. That's the distal end farthest away from the heart. Now, so they took this, they cut steps out of them. Now, and that's this stuff here. Now, what is this? This is also tendon. Very, very tough. Very, very excellent building material. And these bumps were the only problem. Otherwise, they were nice flat sheets. Very, very excellent quality. Very few imperfections in them at all. They're just perfect. Flat sheets. Now, this ball right there is pulled out from that socket, which is supposed to be in there. That's an injury. But that strap would have went down to it. These things were literally enormous that were on the earth, and that strap and that ball are shown at Arches National Park and a bunch of other places. Now, don't forget, what this is these are the mats that are on your stomach and your back, and this girdles your body. These they're across your chest and everywhere. They're white, almost no blood in them whatsoever. They're just almost perfect, like rubber bands. And the same thing with the strap. The strap pulls, and the muscle pulls against At a certain point, they goes into abrupt transition right into muscle. So you have these tendons, and then boop, the muscle starts. Well, you see them on Earth, as I did a video the other day, you see the tendons themselves. And then just deep down in the cliff is all this layers of the tissue of the body, because underneath here, there's literally hundreds, minimum, layers of body tissue. And when you look at something like this is just nothing but body tissue, basically, from some creature, I don't know what kind. But if you really looked at that in a microscope, you're going to see it's literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little layers in there. Even the ones that you look at as one layer are many, many, many layers on top of each other. So a lot of that's not understood. The inside of that tendon, there's just a zillion layers. And you can actually see them in the test walls that they did, where they scraped these. Well, I'll be showing you that, at some point. All right, so you've seen those. These are the tendon mats. These are the straps and the balls. And here's what happens when they are big and people start walking on them. There's a strap. Here's the ball. Around it is eroded. It's just what happens here and there. Sometimes this erodes. Usually that's what happens. These erode because they're less structural than the ball. The ball is an anchor. The strap has got to move and flex and do all that. The ball is pretty solid. That's why you see the ball right here. You see the balls over there. They're everywhere. But the straps, like there's one right there that's just eroded away. That was a strap. They have a central core, and all of these little structures, see all this stuff? This is all tissue flesh. This is all fleshy little pockets in the flesh. And that ball comes down to here, and all of that stuff has eroded. And that is exactly what I just showed you here. There's no difference. It's the exact same thing. No difference whatsoever. Now, in this tendon, you can't see it, but they're made out of blocks. There's blocks in here. And that's how it is able to weave and bend and all that. It's not like a flat, solid sheet. It can flex this way or that way or up and over, down. That's your body. Girdle has to be able to do all that. It has to be able to flex in every single different way. And it can. All right, this is the aponeurosis tendon. These are the stalks that they just snapped them off. And if you look closely, and I've been showing this very often lately, these things, because it just seems like people are not paying attention. So I just have to show them over and over until somebody finally says, wow. People are saying it, but a lot of it's getting confused with a lot of crazy ideas that make this seem silly. I'm showing evidence, and I'd like the people to just keep some of the other stuff away from my stuff. Look at my stuff, that's fine, but don't make claims about what I don't claim, because if I don't have the evidence, I don't make the claim. The evidence is the claim. I'm not making the claims about anything. All I'm saying is this tissue here has blocks. That's natural in here. There's always like an outside layer, another layer, another layer, another, and they just go deep, 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 and they change characteristics as they go in. These blocky things make it so that you can do all this stuff along these little planes and slide and so forth. And in between every one of those blocks, there's a layer of what is called small leucine-rich proteins, which allows them to move along and do all that stuff, but still stay tightly attached. These are tough, very tough, but it's their tendons. And to me, I can only see one possibility here, is this was a test wall. What should we do? Should we scrape it right down to nothing? Should we leave the bumps? Should we do this with that, or whatever? See how things fall out, I guess. If you would think of another reason for that, I'd like to know what it is. But that is right there is one of those stalks with the blood right in it still. You see that? that would have been one of those little things that ran over to a ball. And then this stuff pulled back and forth against that ball. That's how tendons work. They're anchors. All right, so like I said, I have to explain every one of these features and, exactly how they form and all of this stuff. And nobody has been able to this point in time. They leave these things alone because they're just too much for anybody to explain. How'd that happen? I think I understand how that happened. And I think I understand the chemistry, the nucleophilic invasion, substitution, all that stuff. And they had machines here. I can't see how anybody can deny that. This, when I looked at this as carefully as I could, it goes all the way from there over to here. This is like a gigantic platform of tank treads. And this trench and this trench and that trench up there, I believe, were how they anchored this in. Because think of it this way, there's absolutely no question whatsoever that when this thing was put here, however it got here, I don't know. Did it drive up there? I don't know. But it was wet when it arrived, however it arrived. And it's in here with all these little slat-looking things, which were like tank treads. And this would be an anchor so it wouldn't go this way in this wet stuff. And this would be an anchor, and these would be anchored so that it wouldn't go that way. So now you got a platform. And that's a pretty good sized platform. Did they come off and grab stuff like this off the edge? I don't know. They cut these things, some of these things when they cut them are just stunningly, spectacularly cut. They didn't do that with copper chisels or stones or any of that stuff. And then they moved these down and made walls out of them. I mean, it just is what that is. And these are Achilles tendons. They're all over the world. It's not just here or there. And they use them to make these walls. Some of the walls have bumps and some of them don't. Some of them, this one here, is made with a little bit chunk of, I believe that's bone. Big mistake because it erodes. Probably only going to last 5,000 years. But I'm going to tell you, normally they didn't do that. This one particular wall section here is really at the bad end of town. They didn't care much about this. That must have been the furthest away fortification. I don't know what they used them for, but they look like they would be pretty formidable to try to get over that. All right, just because we figure out this stuff is made of flesh, which is sort of a gooey, moldable putty. It's really like putty. But was in the body in this tendon. And these are the bumps, and they broke them off. You can actually see the stalk on this one. You can find these features. It's not hard. Now, here's the key, though. First of all, they're just absolutely gigantic, so there's going to be a transportation issue. How they did, I don't know. But you see these lines here? How perfect that is, not perfect. Just because they're putty doesn't mean you just throw them up there and they turn into like these absolutely flawless connections. They would, but I don't think they turn into these perfectly straight lines converging as they do. That, to me, indicates some very talented construction. Now, and some of them are even more talented than that. Unbelievable. Some of these things were just artistic as can be. All right, I think I'm going to pretty much wrap it up, but look at how fabulous these are. This is nice. This is well done. However, these guys did some exceptional work. That's just showing off. And it's doing a good job at it. That's fabulous. Look at this. Absolutely no need to do this other than an artistic, they had time to do these things and do them right. And the work that they did down there in South America, absolutely stunning. And again, they had some kind of equipment. They had things with tractor trailer, you know, whatever these big wheels are that have the things to swamp buggies or whatever they call them. And they used the body parts that were here after the Great Flood that had not dried out yet. They were still wet. They're driving in them while they're wet, scooping them up. And that the one I showed you, the nasty wall, this one here, this is this spot right here. That's a bone, and that's some blood in the bone and so forth. Bone didn't make it the way the tendon did, and even the flesh, when it was in the right conditions, the right place, under the right pH and soaked for such and such a time, the flesh turned out pretty good. They call it red sandstone. Well, not red sandstone, basically. Red clays. Red sandstone, yeah. But tendon is better, and this is the tendon. All of these things are basically tendon right around here, and maybe muscle. Could be muscle. Look at that nasty thing. They must have just had this leftover stuff and said, just put it down the end of their wall down there, because normally you don't see them like that, or like this. Even these are not perfect. So this was not the best spot. That's fabulous, fabulous, fabulous. Look at the size of these things. Somebody did this very, very excellent craftsmanship. And this is, again, this kind of moss stuff is growing into, it's lichen and this strange colored mosses grow into tendons. Green mosses grow into artery blood. It's just that there's two different styles. The tendons had a different chemistry to them, which for some reason makes this colored stuff grow. And the moss would be green if it was artery blood. That's vein blood. And the vein blood is inside the tendons. Well, boy, that's a hard one to say. But anyway, I'm going to tell you right now, there's two different mosses. The green grows in the artery blood, you know, like flesh. Okay, Devil's Causeway coming up in the next video soon, probably. We're going to talk about all these different patterns and so forth, and all these little hex squares and things, squares and hexes and all that kind of stuff. Why is that? What's that all about? Well, we'll try to figure it out. All right, thank you. Love you all. Happy Memorial Day.